The session will continue to explore institutional connectivity on digital innovation, regulatory excellence, and cooperation. Now, we are privileged to have 4 distinguished speakers with us for this session. Ms. Win-min Phyoe, head of the Trade and Investment Unit of the ASEAN-Korea Center. She will be the moderator for this session. And our speakers are Dr. Kiki Verico, Associate Professor in International Economics at Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Yoon-seok, Executive Principal of the Global ICT Cooperation at the National Information Society Agency, Mr. Eun-kyung, Team Leader of the ESG Platform Business Team at SKCNC, and last but not least, Mr. Izahar Izham, Partner and Head of the Government Advisory Practice at Zaid and Ibrahim & Co. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Kiki Verico, joining us virtually today through Zoom. He will share his insights on the topic of ASEAN economic integration in the inclusive digital era. Let's give him a warm round of applause as we welcome him to the forum.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the MC for introducing me. Okay, I would like to share my thought as my background as a scholar. So I will more talk about the general perspective and the framework of the ASEAN economic integrations, particularly in this inclusive digital era. So there are 3 points that I would like to put on the table. Number one is I would like to propose answer where the ASEAN economic integration now, and then the situations that given the geopolitical, geoeconomic situations, that more on the VUCA, vulnerability, uncertain, complexity, and ambiguity nowadays, and that where the ASEAN and then what the ASEAN Indonesia and my country has to watch out for this progress and situations nowadays. And the number 3, I would like to share about the importance of economic convergence. In ASEAN, we call it ASEAN's pillars 3, the economic convergence on as sufficient conditions given this digital progress in the world that influence in ASEAN economic integrations. And last but not least, for the future of the ASEAN economic integrations given this inclusive era. So just to share with you that in the last 20 years, we have been witnessing that ASEAN show a positive progress, both in intra-trade and intra-investment. I divide trade and investment from only ASEAN and then ASEAN Plus under the openness of the principle of the ASEAN. And we can see that both shows significant progress, especially in intra-investment. From the line on the left side, you can see that intra-investment, increased significantly both for ASEAN and ASEAN Plus. For ASEAN from 9% to 13% in the last 20 years, and then from the ASEAN Plus, including Korea inside, ROK inside, from 25% to 31%. What does it mean? It means that ASEAN has been moved to the so-called intra-trade to intra-investment. What is the implication from the improving this? That means it will carry the movement of the people, the third pillar in ASEAN, of which the people-to-people relationship. So ASEAN moves from free flows of trade, goods, free flows of investment, and then free flows of people, and of course free flows of services, because movement of the people also means movement of the families across countries in the region. So now we can see the ASEAN become more advanced in its integrations. The other thing we need to see also the position of ASEAN in the world that you can see from the left-hand side. At least 4 or 5 ASEAN member states dominant in the world export in terms of the WTO member state. Then we can see that also ASEAN show positive progress in its intra-trade, double in the last 3 years. And then we can also see the capacity of the trade in services, which show a significant progress. So given this situation, ASEAN also not only perform its progress, good progress intra-trade and also its role in the world, but also ASEAN show the convergence in the economics. For instance, ASEAN has backward and forward participation. Backward mean production network countries, and forward means the countries that abundance in support outside member state. And we can see the progress of the complexity index, for instance, like Vietnam, so significant progress in its capacity to produce complex products, and also like Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, and not to mention for the countries, the founding member state of the ASEAN that also show progress. So that means ASEAN is a good in terms of progress in economic integration. But here in my simulations, given this geopolitical and geoeconomic situations that's uncertain, I try to simulate and then found that from the upper, that's a quantity effect, and the below is a price effect. The quantity effect is if negative, it means not good news, but if positive, it's good. But below is a price effect is the other way around. Positive mean not good, and negative means good, because negative meaning that we can improve our productivity so we can sell with a lower price but good quality. If we compare these two simulations that I show you here, ASEAN, each ASEAN country, each ASEAN member state has different response, potential response, of course, for this coming 2025. And what I found is the biggest country in ASEAN, the only country in ASEAN member state that become a member of G20, which is Indonesia, have to be careful because the impact is estimated higher than other member states, and that will influence other ASEAN as a whole, because Indonesia, in terms of populations and in terms of GDP, is above 30 or 40% of the ASEAN. That means very dominant. Therefore, instability or anything happen to Indonesia economy will also affect ASEAN. So this one of the founding that I see. And the thing is how to manage this. We have to ASEAN has to come together to make economic convergence happens. This is the third principle, the so-called Bali Concord, the third. That the convergence is very important, and how we move from the messy or fluctuated figures on the left-hand side to the right-hand side, which is like a diamond with a strong structure. And that means in this digital era that can be like accelerating the economic convergence, but also at the same time at the beginning create a gap, not only from the market perspective, but also from the government perspective. From the government perspective, we can see the overall classification. For instance, country like Singapore, Malaysia is very advanced in terms of e-government, but other countries not too advanced, and other countries still at the level of middle inclusivity. So that means we need to harmonize and apply mutual recognition and apply, accelerate the regulations, the framework, the implementation of the from the government's regulations to support the advancement of the market over the digital platform or digital economy, the innovation support, the implementations. And that's the gap that we found. On the right-hand side, member state has different challenge of which ASEAN members. So this is my last slide. In the future, of course, ASEAN, with its open principles, has so many cooperations with ROK, with China, with Japan, with Australia, New Zealand, and including the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And at the same time, each of member state of ASEAN has a bilateral, like Indonesia, and ROK has Indonesia, South Korea, JEPA, and then also with Japan, and so on and so forth. But on top of that, the thing that ASEAN must improve also from the unilateral perspective, that means continuous domestic structural reform, including reform on the regulations that can support the economic convergence over the digital economy. So thank you very much. I stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Verico, for sharing your insights on ASEAN economic integration. Next, we are delighted to have Dr. Yoon-seok to deliver his thoughts on building a seamless and dynamic data ecosystem across ASEAN. Please move to the platform. Yes.
My topic that I brought today is how to build a seamless and dynamic data ecosystem across ASEAN. Okay. Before we dive into the topic, let's see Korea's data ecosystem, how it looks like, the governance and organization and everything. Okay, this is Korea's data ecosystem. We have open public data platform, which gathers all the data from government organizations and open those data through this portal. And I think we have about 60 billion hits every year, or more than that. And second is big data platform. We have 21 domain-centric big data platforms. Domain means industry, which means healthcare, transportation, finance, and etc. We have 21 big data platforms. It gathers most structured and numeric data, and if you go one of these platforms, you can trade actual your data, which means you can buy your data or you can sell your data. The last one is AI data platform. We have about more than 800 AI training data sets nowadays. The Korean government invested about more than $1 billion over the last 3 years in order to build this platform. Okay, and this is the data governance for the Korean government. First of all, Presidential Committee oversees all government organizations, and for public data, Ministry of Interior and Safety is in charge, and private data, Ministry of Science and ICT, they are in charge, and there are several supporting organizations. For example, my agency also supporting the government side, and we have K-Data, KISA, and etc. And these are three important data-related laws and regulations in Korea. We have Personal Information Protection Act. It regulates freedom and rights of individuals. And second is Information Communication Network Act, regulating using information and communication services. The last one is Credit Information Act, which regulates use of credit information. Those are three triangular data-related laws and regulations, and very important for data-related. Okay, this is one of the biggest, projects the Korean government initiated. We call Korean New Deal, and it consists of three parts: Digital New Deal and Green New Deal, and Digital and Green New Deal combined. The biggest, project was Digital New Deal. It starts from 2020 to 2023, and the Korean government invested only on data about more than $1 billion for 3 years. That's how that's the Korean how important the Korean government treat data. Okay, And then let's think about how we can build a data ecosystem, okay? This is the important part. Wherever I go recently, I'm working as a senior advisor with the World Bank, and wherever I go, whoever invite, and first word I said was, do not build data platforms or systems first. You need something else. This is what I'm going to talk about, okay? Okay, usually countries' data systems are looking like this. No classification model, most of data from international organizations, too broad to find data so that users cannot find any data, no answers for most of queries, right? But looks like this, because all services or systems are disconnected, but you want to connect all systems and platforms together, right? Looking like this, right? But how can you build this connected data environment ecosystem? First of all, you really need government business function-centric data classification model, which means you have to know what kind of data all the government officers every day create. And you have to classify those data into something, your classification model, so that all data can be connected and searched by the classification model. Second is metadata model. Of course, this is kind of the basic model for all data. The last one is data visualization. How can you show your data to the users so that they can quickly find and usability upgrade? So, business classification model. This is what I did last year. I designed ASEAN data classification model last year, and I collected 10 countries, 2 ministries, government functions from 10 countries. One is a Ministry of Healthcare, the other one is Ministry of Agriculture. And I collected, then I grouped into 3 levels. Level 1, bureau level. Level 2, division level. Level 3, official level. And in this way, we can search every data they create, and we can connect those data together, right? Like this. So I give the code to all the data and the classification model so that later on, if you build systems based on this data model, you can search, find, you can use your data easily. And the metadata model. So Korea has 32 metadata fields, and the US government has 18 metadata fields. Metadata is, is kind of unique field that you can find. Something like this: title, publisher, updates, data portal, URL, file type. Those are things mostly you need. These are 10 fields that you must have. You cannot miss these. Of course, you can add more fields, but 10 these fields is required. Okay, after that, I collected data from 10 ASEAN member countries. Then I analyzed something like this: Malaysia, number of deaths by type of disease, and Thailand, COVID testing by month. Because I can collect all the data by functions, I can do this, right? And data visualization, looking like this. So, how can you, show your data is very important, because even though you have tons of data in your platform, they cannot find. You know your data very well, but people do not know your data, and they will have very hard time to find your data, search data, use data. So data visualization, how are you going to show you, is very crucial, okay? And this is the report that I wrote with World Bank. It's going to be published in this March. Analyzed 2 cases, Korean cases and the United cases. So if any country wants to build a shared data platform or government open data platform, they must have these 6 components. And for example, governance. Do you have national, level governance? Do you have a coordination body? Do you have agency level governance and blah, blah? Laws and regulations, open by default and so on and so forth. And standards and system, they are in red. In order to build the systems or platforms, you must have these components and fields and assessment, utilization, promotion. Those are very much required. So if you want to build any data platform or system, first of all, you have to diagnose your status first based on these 6 components and elements. And then if you have strong governance and laws and regulations, standards, system, assessment, utilization, promotion, then you can build the system. It doesn't mean if you are missing one of these components or elements, you cannot build any systems. But in the future, you have to add all these all these components and elements, because if you miss one of these components or elements, the platform is gonna having a difficult time expanding or improving utilization or accessibility, okay? Okay, this is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your ideas on an ASEAN-wide data ecosystem, Dr. Ko. Next, I am pleased to invite Mr. Eun-kyung, who will share his insights on change and innovation through customer-centered perspective and creative thinking. Please join me in giving him a big round of applause.
Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm currently employed at SK CNC, the IT service company in Korea. Maybe the data center business is one of our SK CNC business agenda, and SK CNC has 2 sides of data center, and I am going to tell you about the data center business briefly with the case of the SK CNC. Okay, maybe maybe especially in IT industries, this agenda is well known and can be boring, so I would like to ask for your understanding. Okay, this slide shows what the data center business is. Simply saying, it's a kind of providing rental service, such as server, network device, and management services. But this is a little bit different from common rental service business, because this rental service is on a co-location basis. Data center business is based on the interconnectivity among the companies to companies, markets to markets, and global regions to regions. This is the key point of the data center business. There is no regional barrier and no country barriers. Also, because there is no barriers, because this business is intrinsically based on connectivity. For this business, all we need is good infrastructure, technical capability, and management process. When we think about the data center business, ASEAN countries have so many advantages: renewable powers, well-displayed human resource, and so on. Trend of data center business, as you know, the scale of the data center business has been rapidly growing year to year. As you can see, the regional market portion is equally distributed. It means that the data center business is a stable and sustainable growing industry in any region. Current business trend requires extensive data, flexible size of service, and available connectivity to resolve those requirements with an effective way. Companies usually select the data center outsourcing services. Especially AI is a key word in all kinds of industries currently, so that's why the data center business is steadily growing. And you can see hyperscale data center is explosively growing also. Hyperscale data center means literally very large scale, and there is integrated services or devices. This business is well aligned with the digital transformation, the recent trend of IT strategy. Okay, data center business needs some points that we have to take consideration and prepare. As you see, location, building, power system, and cooling system, security, connectivity, and operation, that's all. Usually, these 7 points should be considered as a mandatory basis. Let me tell you about these 7 points with the case of the SK CNC, my company. Okay, SKCNC have two sites of the data center in Korea. One is in Daedok, the province in Korea. The other is in Pangyo, near the place of the Seoul, the capital city of Korea. We opened the Pangyo data center 7 years ago, and today I focus on the Pangyo data center. Because this Pangyo data center reflects the brand new story of the digital transformation, all the trend of the requirement for latest business model. Data center must have 4 differentiated comparativeness: reliability, efficiency, scalability, connectivity. And the reliability is equal to the stability with the well-designed backup process and resistant to the natural disaster. Efficiency means the energy efficient and optimized HVAC and real-time efficiency analysis service. Scalability means ease to expansion according to the customer demand, and connectivity means ensuring customer network ownership through the neutral line interconnection and flexible network bandwidth usage according to the network traffic. The first thing is a good location. Good location is surely one of the important points in the data center business. Pangyo is located near the Seoul, the capital city of Korea. There's representative innovation cluster, so many R&D center of companies. And also transportation hub of expressway and convenient public transportation system there. The next is building. Total 66,000 square meters and 10th floor, 5 computing floors, 2 infrastructure floors, and 3 facility floors. It features that modular, designed, flexible scalability according to the customer demand. Earthquake resistant design is applied corresponding to the magnitude 7.0. Drainage system also applied to respond heavy rain falling of 100 millimeter per hour. Okay, the next is power. The power means the electronic power. With the national backbone of the transmission lines, high capacity emergency generators, UPS, the emergency battery for IT loads and cooling loads. CTTS means the continuous power supply switch. To sum up, they are featuring that stable and large capacity power performance. About the cooling system, this is for the stability of physical condition. There are 2 points. The one is for maximizing the cooling efficiency aligned with the electronic power, such as free cooling chiller. For instance, wintertime, through the direct heat exchange with the outside air, can reduce the operating power. The other is ensuring the facility availability, sufficient spare capacity, UPS, real-time monitoring and control system. Security is a core of the data center business. We provide service portal to customers. Conveniently, customers can process the granting access and equipment carry in, carry out. And also the SOC, Security Operating Center, controls all activity in data center, from the entry to exit, checking out every equipment, even mobile devices also, like boarding airplanes. Connectivity is another point of different, very important comparativeness in data center. Data center meets the 2 requirements. The one is to provide various line connection for customer network ownership. In Korea, even though there are several line business companies, we provide connectivity to all line business. The other is cloud service connection, easily and fast, such as AWS, MS Azure, Google, and so on. This feature means customer-centered perspective, providing network utilization and connectivity service. Finally, operation, process and integrated management of the infrastructure. DCIM means integrated infra management process and system, real-time monitoring, performance analysis, automatic control. Conclusively, provide continuous service. Okay, it's over. I expect with the AI smart plant and the growth of the digital economy, data center business also can be growing explosively in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Choi. Finally, we have Mr. Izahar Izham, who will join us virtually and present on the topic of regulatory framework for new areas of cooperation, namely digitalization. You now have the floor, Mr. Izham.
Hello and good afternoon from Malaysia. Thank you again for the introduction. I'm pleased to be invited to this event together with the distinguished panel that already presented earlier. As introduced, my name is Izahar, and I'm a partner from KPMG Law Malaysia. Just some context, I'm actually a lawyer, but I'm not a traditional lawyer. Instead of going to court, my work focuses on public policy and regulatory reform. In the last 10 years, I've been focusing a lot in this space, especially in Malaysia. And in recent years, I've been doing some work with the ASEAN Secretary in the region. Okay, I'm going to go to my next slide. The next slide shows basically a bit of structure in terms of what I want to present to you today. So there are two parts to my presentation. I think the first part will focus on basically the central theme of regulatory excellence and cooperation, and essentially what does that mean to us in the ASEAN member states. And I think the second part will focus on sharing how these themes such as regulatory excellence and cooperation can enable regulatory frameworks for cooperation, such as in emerging areas like digitalization. So given my background and experience, I'll look at the topic from a more regulatory and policy perspective, as well as sharing some of the experience I've had working in this space. Now, the next slide kind of talks about where we are at today. This is, setting the stage before we actually go through the digitalization aspect. I think it's important to know that the theme or topic of regulatory excellence and cooperation is not something new in any of the ASEAN plans or ASEAN connectivity plans. In fact, if we go back to even the 2010 plan, which recognizes the importance of this theme, by actually identifying concepts such as having effective regulatory frameworks under the people-to-people connectivity trust. I think my fellow presenter, Dr. Kiki, actually mentioned that. And this theme or topic has been one of the continuing strategies in the various action plans, specifically with the concept of idea to accelerate the development of ICT infrastructure and services in each of the AMS by having a robust ICT infrastructure in tandem with better HR. And I think the key word is enabling regulatory environment. The other themes that we also see in these action plans that transition into the 2025 action plan is the need to harmonize regulatory frameworks or regulatory requirements, which is goes back to the idea or notion to support the free movement of products, goods, especially in setting common rules for standards and conformity assessment procedures in ASEAN member states. So in the 2025 plan, there's already a specific focus in itself, which drives, regulatory reform under the strategic area of regulatory excellence, which covers this. And given the importance of these themes, I think particularly to international trade, I believe this is intended to be replicated in the upcoming ASEAN Connectivity Vision 2045. Now, I'm not going to double click so much into this topic, but I think it's important to also highlight to you some of the lessons that we have learned in this area from our midterm review of the 2025 ASEAN Connectivity Plan as we start transitioning to the new one. So as you can see here, there are two objectives of focus under the 2025 plan in relation to regulatory excellence, which are basically to harmonize standards, conformance, and technical regulations, as well as to reduce NTM non-tariff measures. Both these focus areas, if you look at this slide, perform reasonably well, indicated by, as you can see, variable rating to good evaluation that was given in these areas. Although this midterm review doesn't specifically indicate the shortcomings for each focus area, let me kind of summarize what are the key observations here. I think number one is the strengthening the in-country implementation. So basically, how do AMS countries apply these action plans and principles at national or domestic level? Number two is basically convening connectivity efforts and engaging ASEAN partners with a more structured approach. I think we kind of also mentioned it in this panel where we want to have or build projects together. And the third one, which is also a key theme, is basically to deepen private sector engagement. So not just involving the government, but also working with industries. Okay, this slide basically represents the report card of achievements made, right? So we have the ASEAN Connectivity Plan 2025, which is kind of the overarching theme. At the same time, we have the AAC Blueprint 2025. The reason why I'm mentioning this specifically is because under this blueprint, it gave rise to the work plan on good regulatory practice, right? To look into the themes and areas for regulatory reforms, which had four key priority areas, which was completed last year. So if you look at the slide from left to right, the first one is the ASEAN GRP core principles, which was launched in 2018. Secondly was the ASEAN Handbook on Good Regulatory Practice, which was launched in 2022. The third one is the multi-country project on EV and battery, which was done in Indonesia, Laos, and Malaysia. I'll talk about that separately and completed last year. And the fourth one also completed last year was the capacity building initiatives. Now, it's also notable to mention that in addition to these various activities, there were also guiding documents produced by ASEC that came out of this work plan. Some worth mentioning is the guidelines on good regulatory practice, as well as the baseline study for each country. And from the earlier slide and this slide, we see that, in summary, there's been a lot of progress made. But I think the question that remains is how do we leapfrog this progress for the next 20 years to come? One of the lessons learned that I mentioned earlier from the midterm review talked about institutionalizing this GRP or having an institution in place. And in short, we call it a regulatory oversight body. And I think if you look at this slide, there's at least one formal in-government or government-endorsed entity in existence for each ASEAN member state. So if you don't know, a regulatory oversight body, the role and function is to monitor regulatory quality and development. But I think, in terms of the finding, it's not just enough to have an entity organization in place, but what is critical is the capacity and competencies of these bodies. So I'm not going to go again a lot into detail as to why. I think some of the findings is in terms of the capability for each ASEAN member state, it really ranges. It's not the same in terms of mature to basically new. There are issues in terms of language and also cultural differences. And I think one of the other findings from the midterm review was also understanding what the roles were. Basically, in conducting an anonymous survey, I think only 60% of respondents basically said they actually understood what they were supposed to do in these regulatory oversight body institutions. So even with these institutions in place, right, I think the challenge still exists in terms of the adoption and application of these principles at national levels, which we can say is quite disproportionate. Now, the second, I think, finding which I also want to highlight talks about the policies and process that support these institutions. As mentioned earlier, I think there's been a lot of good work produced by the Secretariat to produce reference materials, policies, processes. As you can see at the top level, these are the ones produced by ASEAN Secretariat. At the bottom level, there's also the ones produced at national level. I've used Malaysia as an example of some of these documents that mirror the ASEAN levels documents. But again, citing the midterm review, there'll always be a disparity between the guiding documents and the adopted versions, given that these such documents are only best practice and actually non-binding in nature. So again, the applicability or implementation at AMS level is very different unless joint projects are initiated to basically understand the needs of each economy and to see how we can dismantle these regulatory barriers or regulatory issues. Now, if I move on to the next slide, there's also the last finding of the midterm review, which talks about the point of the public-private partnership. I think it's quite telling from the findings of the review that this needs to be further reinforced. I think the first line there kind of says the current engagement with the private sector has been limited. So you can see that it's been underutilized. If you ever heard of this quote, it talks about the need to have a whole of government approach. But of course, nowadays people go beyond that and use the term whole of nation to basically appreciate the need to have other actors or importance of other actors in the ecosystem. When we talk about these other actors, we're not just talking about government, right, which is the traditional policy making sphere or policy making arm, but we're also recognizing the role and the need to have industry and associations involved in the policy development. I also want to share in this slide, I think, which is quite important to show how we can use this regulatory excellence and regulatory cooperation to kind of revisit regulatory frameworks by showing you the use case that we did last year in terms of the multi-country project, that was focusing on GRP implementation on the EV industry and battery industry in 3 countries, as I mentioned to you, Indonesia, Laos, and Malaysia. I can't give you the specific findings of this use case because this has not been endorsed by the HLTF. But I think I can give you some of the broad lessons or learnings that we can basically adopt to use it to look into regulatory reform. I think the first one that is most important is the relevance of the theme. So if you look at the use case in this situation, it's on EV, right? So EV is something that is topical, something that is contemporary, something that is, in short, trending. So we can actually use the regulatory excellence and cooperation opportunities to look at things which are important to us today and not something that is, basically not in the radar of AMS or other countries. Number two, the opportunity to look at it as a tool to spur development and also look into relevant regulatory framework. So as you can see here, the baseline for each country on EV regulations or EV laws is different. But by applying this tool, it can actually be a catalyst for reform. Although, of course, at different levels, if you look at the issues faced by each country, it is different. But they use this opportunity to basically revisit these areas by having this cooperation. And last but not least, I think going to topic of cooperation or collaboration is on harmonization, and that's quite important. Not necessarily having the same laws for each countries, but actually, in a way, if you ask me what I think about it, is that it's a healthy competition because having direct access to these line ministries working in this space, I can see that if each of these countries can make this change in the ASEAN jurisdiction, they're very much interested to learn from one another. If Laos can do it, why can't Indonesia? If Indonesia can do it, why can't Malaysia? Because we have a lot of commonality being in the ASEAN jurisdiction. So I think in a way it's having that kind of very healthy competition to want to learn and want to develop together. Now this moves me to kind of the last point that I want to make. I think the opportunities for digitalization, we look into international regulatory cooperation. Now, what do I mean by international regulatory cooperation? If countries such as Korea and others beyond, I think beyond ASEAN, if they think that policy harmonization between intra-ASEAN countries are not happening already at the national level, it is definitely going to happen. And if you ask me why, I think the answer is quite obvious here. I think because of these requirements from going into, for example, international agreements, international obligations, RCEP, CPTPP, for example, there are good regulatory practice teams, right? And these teams require, again, ASEAN member states to basically dismantle these regulatory barriers. If you look at countries such as Indonesia and I believe Thailand last year, they were basically acceding to OECD full member countries. And by doing so, again, there are GRP requirements that they need to align regulatory frameworks with OECD requirements. So because of this, right, you can see that these international standards would be imposed. And basically, because of these standards being imposed, they would have to open the doors, for AMS countries to revisit the regulatory framework. Now,
Mr.
going on
Izham,
to this.
sorry to interrupt. Could you please wrap up your presentation as we have a little bit of a time constraint?
Okay, I'll just
Thank you very
jump
much.
to my last slide. Thank you. So I think, looking into the opportunities of digitalization, and this is quite key in trying to answer the second question. We don't have a specific use case right now that we have applied in AMS, but I think something similar to what we did for EV is quite telling. And of course, we can replace that model with anything. I use AI here because AI is very topical, but let me just walk you through this model. So by having this regulatory excellence, number one, it will force you to look at the root cause of your problem. So in analyzing any issue that you have, it has to be specific, right? It goes beyond just saying AI in nature. But when you talk about AI, for example, what do you mean about AI? What are you actually regulating, right? And it actually forces you to look into these regulatory barriers. Are these regulatory barriers actual, or are they just perceived? Number two, I think what it forces you to look at is also tangible objectives. So in terms of any intervention you want to design, it has to be measured and also something that you can evaluate. Number three, before you go into any regulatory development or reform, you have to consider non-regulatory options. So in the multi-country project, one of the observations was the findings did not actually create a law, but they decided to work with with industry to basically resolve or address the issue. In terms of the impacts, right? I think the impacts need to be measured qualitatively and quantitatively. Another key aspect is on consultation. So engaging with various stakeholders, whether they're interested or influential in your proposal. I think this goes beyond your jurisdiction, and it may involve, stakeholders from different jurisdictions. And I think last but not least is kind of having a strategy for implementing these initiatives. So it doesn't have to be very sophisticated, but you may need to work with countries from other jurisdictions to basically ensure compliance and enforcement of any of your interventions. So that's all for my slide right now. Thank you for listening to my presentation and being a good audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Izham. Thank you, Mr. Izham, and all our esteemed speakers. We will now transition to the discussion segment of this session. Like the previous sessions, audience questions and remaining time will be presented on the screen in front of the panelists to address. Now, allow me to hand over the floor to our moderator, Ms. Winmin Phyoe, and the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone, all on site here and all the speakers online. So here we have all the speakers for sharing, your expertise and experiences in your specific topics. And after listening to your insightful and very informative presentation on ASEAN integration and also the data ecosystem and also the experiences of the success story of the data center, and also about the regulatory excellences and some digital perspectives. So I recognize, that data-driven organizations or policy making actually perform so much better because they are able to improve efficiency and long-term growth, and also can help the complex issue to be solved with the rational and also the insightful solutions. So as well as on the other hand, the technology advancement and digital also refers to the transformation of the electronic and automatic workflows. So therefore, regulatory framework also bring about the confidence to the public and also for the backbone of the economy and the people who depends on. So however, if we see, we also cannot left behind about the development gap among the countries. So in connection with these all perspectives, I have two questions, but my first question is a bit already included some information in Mr. Mohamad, but I think I would like to hear more concise information in some perspectives. So my questions will be, how shall we bridge the gap between the between the quick transformation of the technology changes and the regulatory readiness of the countries. And also the second question is, how do we build the data governments based on the experiences and the success stories of the businesses? So thank you. The floor is for the speakers. Could you please share from Mr. Choi first? Yeah.
Okay, data center. In the case of the data center service viewpoint, traditionally the data governance means that it's kind of the management framework and the process. So it means that the number one important point is security. And not only the local regulation, also the customer requires so many kind of the security, level of security. So data center service provider have to satisfy all kind of these requirement. And on the basis of this kind of the security, they have to assure these 3 points. The one is reliability, accuracy, and availability. These 3 points is very important. So the process and technical support have to can cover all these, satisfy these 3 points. And recently, I think that maybe the digital economy, maybe there's something new brand story about it. The data governance is connectivity. So connectivity means that it's a kind of line to line and cloud to cloud and system to system. It means that including data processing and the communication and all kind of we can analyzing we can the data scientist. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please, Mr. Ko.
Okay, how can we build a strong data governance? I think that's very difficult and it's a philosophical question. I can summarize into this maybe. There are 2 ways of building a data governance. First one is top-down. For example, the Korean government takes top-down approach. The other one is bottom-up. For example, the United States government takes bottom-up approach. Top-down means there's one leading government organization which does all works for the data building data ecosystem. They collect, they clean, they use or whatever they have to do, building systems and building regulations. In Korea, Ministry of Interior and Safety and Ministry of Science and ICT, they are in charge. They are leading all data sectors. The United States is, bottom-up approach. For example, they are having CDO in each organization. They are leading all, data-related work inside each organization, and they summing up those organizations' experience on top of it, and then they build, data governance. That takes about 10 years for the United States government. But once you build that kind of bottom-up approach, it's very concrete. The speed of collecting data and everything takes, it's just light speed. But if you take top-down approach, you can start very fast at the beginning because 1 or 2, organizations takes everything. But once you hit some point, it's going to be slowed down because you have to do this and do that and do that. So which one are you going to take? Top-down approach or bottom-up approach? It depends on each country's political system. And I strongly recommend if you would like to build a very strong data governance or ecosystem fast and quickly, do top-down approach first, then move to bottom-up approach later. That's kind of hybrid approach that I recommend. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then the floor to Dr. Key.
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. I'm really happy Mr. Izhar mentioned about the OECD and then the regulatory impact assessments. Those very important, and we are talking about the upstreaming level of any activities, integrations, or interrelations within ASEAN countries, ASEAN Plus, and so on and so forth. Of course, the root is from the regulations from the each country that independent, and each country has its own types of regulatory frameworks. Like Indonesia, in the last 5 years, we adopt the so-called omnibus law. That means take all the regulation into one. And I would like to also touch an issue now in the United States, Republican, that we understand from the historical perspective, starting, for instance, Ronald Reagan back then in 1980s, which support the regulatory impact assessment for the first time. Then we, across the world, using this approach. So what the difference between 40 years ago and now is more challenging, because we have the digital, or we entered the digital era, which is different to 80 or 40 years ago. So now not only regulatory framework that try to close to the market mechanism, but also how it cope with the digital savvy, digital life, and all digital across the sectors. And then the issue is not only for the regulation that close to the market mechanism, works in line, align, and together, but how also about data security, how about the technology gap, and how about the digital lives and digital application across the sectors. So it's not only challenge for each government, but also challenge for the ASEAN as a whole, ASEAN as a region. So combination from the three layers, or three foundation in ASEAN: physical, connectivity, institutional approach, and people to people. And as I mentioned from my first slide, ASEAN already work towards the regional integration until the level of common market with the economic community. That means we are not talking only free flows of goods from country to country, but also free flows of investment, and then investment coming with the people, and then move to the flows of services that, when workers moving from ROK, from South Korea, let's say to Indonesia, bring the family coming, and the family has the children, and then we need to, ASEAN member state has to, provide excellent health services, also provide education services, and that must be convergence. Otherwise, you work in Indonesia, but you put your family, for instance, in Singapore, because the service sectors, health and education, maybe perhaps better there. So, but then that's the issue. We need to have these convergence issues. And then its convergence is to start from the regulations on the regulatory framework. That's, I would like to touch regulatory framework convergence to meet the standard, as Pak Izhar mentioned, for instance, OECD standard, and how to make all the ASEAN member states perhaps become a member state of the OECD to adopt this standard. And then we talk about how it's close to the market and how it's fit with the digital era. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Key. Before we give the floor to Mr. Mohamad, we got the question from QR for Dr. Key. So let me read the questions. So thanks for the presentation. At the moment, Indonesia and Thailand are in the official process of joining OECD. In doing so, a huge scale of economic policy reforms will be placed in both countries, adopting the OECD standards rather than the ASEAN standards. How do you view this change? Would affect the ASEAN's ongoing effort to create the ASEAN economic community? Please, in a short 1 minute.
Okay,
answer.
okay. Is it for me? Okay. Yeah, the way we think that if we meet the standard, the OECD, as also Pak Izhar mentioned, we hope that we meet standard of ASEAN. Yeah, I mean, the OECD standard is very, high, but that's good to push a reform, domestic reform in the member state of ASEAN, like Indonesia, like Thailand. And I think it will create the harmonization because, as mentioned before, in terms of the rank government's regulations that fit with the digital era, Singapore and Malaysia, much more advanced than other member states. But with the proxies of the OECD, I think it make Indonesia and Thailand become more reducing the gap. What I expect is if we meet that standard, then indirectly we meet the standard of the ASEAN. I think that's my general side on this.
Thank you, Dr. Key. So please, the floor for Mr. Mohamad.
Thank you, moderator, and I think thank you, Dr. Kiki. Sorry if I shot you in the foot. Someone asked you the question on what I was talking about. So I'll attempt to answer your question, moderator. You were asking about bridging the gap between quick technology change and also, I think, regulatory readiness, right? I think I covered quite a number of those themes in my presentation earlier, but probably if one of the key lessons that I can probably share with you is going back to what the first moderator said, and if I can kind of summarize, the first moderator said that it's important to ASEAN in terms of digitalization because this would be one of the key drivers coming out of COVID in 2019 or 2020, right? So we are coming out of COVID those years, and these ensuing years are at that recovery period. Now, if we think about it, even a conference of this nature, in those days, we would never have done it hybrid, right? It would have been purely physical. Now myself and Dr. Kiki are doing this online. And it just shows how quickly that, this has become what is the norm. It's not the new norm anymore. It is completely the norm. And the reason why I'm saying all this is because from a regulator's perspective, they need to understand that as well. So for me, the most fundamental thing for them is actually what we call the regulatory mindset, right? The way of thinking. I used to work in a lot of policy work in Malaysia looking at digital platforms. Now, a lot of that work was right before COVID. The regulators in Malaysia basically said, no, these digital platforms are illegal. They don't conform to our law. They don't pay taxes. They don't have any specific licenses for them to operate. And they would always say, look at this law, and in this law it's not there, so therefore they are legal. But now, today, if we go back to the mindsets of these regulators, they won't say that anymore, right? In most cases, they won't. Of course, there are still some, but this mindset is slowly shifting, right? And I think a lot of regulators today have accepted that the way we do business is completely different. And the way we regulate is different. In all these countries, we have e-hailing apps, we have food delivery apps, we have digital banks, and all this is, again, regulated different than traditional brick and mortar industries or businesses. So I think it's quite important, number one, to have that recognition. Number two, I think flowing from that mindset or thought is the tools. I talked about GRP, RIA. I think Dr. Kiki echoed GRP and RIA, but there are so many other tools. In addition to that, now if you look at the various policy documents, GRP RIA is one that is popular. But I think, Korea, you are very good at doing sandbox, right? Regulatory sandbox or regulatory experimentation. Now, these concepts are, I wouldn't say alien, but they are quite new in the ASEAN region. So we are slowly picking up these pieces, right? So if we can't change law today, what other tools can we use to revisit regulatory framework? So in Malaysia, we're starting to use a lot of experimentation, a lot of sandbox, looking at legislation differently. So there are a lot of tools out there that we can also access looking into these policy documents. And I think the last point to actually highlight is the collaboration theme, which I mentioned earlier. I think that actually works wonders, right? Again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's the healthy competition. Just because one ASEAN country can do it, why not? Why can't others do it, right? So I think showing each other that we can do it. I know in a lot of cases we benchmark, Western jurisdictions, US, Europe, and so on. But sometimes those jurisdictions are quite far remote from us, not just in terms of geography, but I think in terms of people, political, society, culture. So in my work going on the ground, looking at regulation, I think looking at the commonality within the ASEAN region actually helps. Those are my 3 key points. Thank you.
Thank you all the speakers for all the presentations and the answer. If I have to wrap up the sessions, we all aware about the regulatory discrepancies still exist across EMS. It is as the challenges and also the requirement, the needs for the harmonization and commonalization of the regulations among the member states and also the development of digitalizations and innovations. It's a very fast advance in the technology. So and also therefore the reality of the institutional connectivity and the fully implementation of the regulatory excellence together with the digitalization and innovation will be very supportive for the other physical connectivity as well as people-to-people connectivity in the region by learning and sharing know-how and the best practices of the countries among each other and as well as from our partners like Korea. So I think it is very fruitful discussions for today, and I think all the audience will also get the clean and concise information on this. Thank you, and thank you for all the speakers and all.
Thank you.
Thank you.